My father has the money to buy a country, but he couldn't buy my cure. I was fading away, literally getting smaller every day, and no luxury doctor could find the cause. What held me together wasn't a hospital, nor expensive medicine. It was sweeping the floor of a dilapidated shop on the other side of town, 3 times a week, without receiving a cent. And you know the sickest part? When my father, the great CEO, found out, he wasn't grateful. He was terrified. Not for me, for the place, for the owner of that shop. Because the second she looked at him, I saw something in my father's face I had never seen. Fear of being recognized. You think this story is about a sick son and an old healer? I thought so too. Until I understood that what was killing me didn't start with me, and that my father had buried a dirty secret to become a billionaire. A secret that old lady kept for too long, and was now ready to explode on our table. Before I tell you this secret, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I stared at the bathroom mirror in my room on the top floor of my father's building, and I swear, I got scared in the stupidest way possible. It was like I was seeing a stranger wearing my skin. The white t-shirt slipped off my shoulders. The collar seemed too wide, and when I ran my hand along my jaw, I felt the bones sharper than yesterday. I pulled the waistband of my pants, and it snapped back loose, as if my body had given up filling the space. And the worst part? I couldn't even remember the last time I felt real. The apartment smelled of expensive coffee and cleaning products, that freshness rich people love, because it doesn't let anyone remember this is just a closed space. Outside, Chicago shone cold, the lake looking like metal. My father, Richard Pierce, was already on the phone before I even finished tying my sneakers. He speaks to the world as if the world were his employee. I brought in another specialist, best in the country. Whatever it costs. He didn't even ask if I wanted it. He just decided, and I just nodded, because that's what I've always done. Do you understand? My whole life I learned that disagreeing had a price. The clinic looked like a hotel. Soft carpet, sparkling water in glass cups. Receptionist smiling like smiling was part of the contract. The doctor measured me with his eyes, the same way one measures a luxury car, and I stood there, quiet, listening to pretty words that said nothing. Exams, markers, let's investigate. Could be stress. When he left the room with my file, I saw my father opening his banking app, already ready to crush the problem with numbers. I clenched my jaw so hard, I felt my temple pulse, not from anger at him, from shame at myself. Because I realized an ugly thing there. I was becoming a project, not a son. In the car, the driver, Caleb, kept his eyes on the road, but I saw in the rearview mirror that he was watching me like someone watching a person about to collapse. And I couldn't fake it. I'm fading, aren't I? My voice came out low, kind of cracked, and the question hung on the leather of the seat. He didn't answer at first. He just gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, as if he had heard that before in his life. The city passed by the window buildings, signs, people walking fast, and I had the ridiculous sensation that everyone there was more solid than me. That night, I couldn't eat. I kept walking around the apartment like an elegant ghost, listening to the expensive silence of the walls. And that's when I caught myself remembering things I always pushed away. The small lies, the cruelties disguised as jokes, the way I treated people like they were scenery. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone full of get well messages from people I barely knew, and I knew with a clarity that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time that no doctor would find this in a blood test. When I called Caleb and said, "Take me to someone who I sent to, afraid to tell the truth," he stood motionless for a second, and then replied, "I know a lady, but if I take you, your life won't go back to being the same." Caleb didn't take me to an address you'd put in a GPS and get a pretty picture. He drove into narrower streets, far from the shop windows and glass buildings, until the asphalt turned into patches, and the city seemed lower, more human. When he stopped, I saw a crooked little sign on a brick facade. No neon, no modern logo. Just simple letters and a window with plants and aligned jars. The air there had a different smell, a mix of wet earth, strong tea, and distant smoke from fried food. And I swear, I was already more attentive, even before opening the door. I stepped down slowly, as if the ground might charge me. The sidewalk had small cracks, and I stood looking at my own feet for a second, trying to understand what I was doing there. Me, Ethan Pierce, son of the guy who controls half the contracts in this city. Caleb stood behind me, respectful but firm, like someone escorting a person who might run away. "Her name is Mrs. Loretta Hayes," he said quietly, "and she doesn't like your type." I almost asked my type, as if I didn't know, but I knew. My type is the type that arrives anywhere thinking they've already paid for everything. The door made a light noise when I pushed it. A small bell rang, and at the same time came that smell of crushed herbs, old wood, and something citrus that cleaned me inside. The place was tight but organized. Shelves with jars, little bags, books with worn covers, and a counter stained from use, not neglect. In the back, an old lady sitting on a simple chair was grinding something in a mortar, as if the whole world were on pause until she finished. She didn't even look at me at first. She just kept grinding with a calm that irritated me and pulled me in at the same time. When she raised her face, I felt like someone had turned a light on in my face. It wasn't a judgment of rich and poor. It was worse. It was as if she could see the parts I hide, even from myself. Her eyes were clear, steady, and her voice came dry, direct. "You aren't sick the way they're looking for." I opened my mouth to explain, to list exams, symptoms, doctor names, that habit of proving I deserve to be taken seriously. But she raised her hand, unhurriedly, and cut me off. "I've seen this before." And then she said the sentence that made my body stand still on the outside and my head turn into a mess on the inside. "You are fading because you never really existed." I let out a short laugh, that laugh we use when we don't want to give the satisfaction of appearing hit. "Sorry, what do you mean?" I tried to maintain my posture, but my words came out less arrogant than I wanted. She pointed to the chair in front of her, and I sat like someone who has no other option. "There are people who are born and become people," she spoke, stirring a jar. "And there are people who are born and become characters. A name, a clothes, a last name that weighs more than the soul itself. You are living like a character boy. And characters don't last." I swallowed hard, because that was offensive. But it was so accurate, I couldn't argue back. And that was when she finished, looking straight at me, as if it were a warning and an invitation at the same time. "If you want to stop disappearing, you'll have to do something money can't buy. And I don't know if you have the courage. Mrs. Loretta didn't give me a miracle tea, nor did she put on that theater rich people love paying for, just to feel like they tried everything. She simply stood up, went to a shelf, and pulled out an old notebook with yellowed pages, full of notes that looked like recipes and confessions mixed together. She placed the notebook on the counter and said, "There are no promises here. There is work." The word hit me like an insult. Work, the way she said it, wasn't a cute internship or experience for a resume. It was real work. And I stood there, hand in my pocket, trying not to look like a scared rich kid, but being exactly that. She tapped her finger on the counter, like someone clocking in, 3 times a week. "No salary. You arrive on time. You do what I say. And you don't disappear in the middle." I thought I heard wrong. "No salary?" I repeated, almost laughing. It was automatic. My head already started calculating. I could write a check, fund the shop, pay for the whole block. And that's it. Trade it all for gratitude and go back to my world. She noticed and narrowed her eyes. "You want to pay to be forgiven," she said. "It doesn't work like that here. Here, you're going to earn it." I clenched my jaw because that hit an ugly place. The place where I knew she was right. I looked at Caleb, looking for support and exit, anything. He stayed quiet, but I saw the confirmation in his face, as if he already knew I needed to hear this for a long time. My throat went dry. "And if I don't do it?" I tried to throw the question as a challenge. Loretta shrugged. "Then go back to your pretty building and keep shrinking until you become a memory." She said memory like it was the most common destination in the world. And that's what got me. I didn't want to become a memory. I didn't want the story of my life to be Richard Pierce's son. Poor thing, couldn't handle it. I didn't want to die as a footnote. On the first day, she didn't even let me get used to it. She put an apron on me that smelled of cheap soap and told me to sweep the floor. I swept like someone who had never swept anything for real. Clumsy, slow, thinking I was doing the most. She watched for a few seconds and just pointed with her chin. Again, you're pushing dirt under the rug, just like you do in your life. I felt the shame rise hot, but I didn't say anything. I bent down and swept again, harder, until the dust rose and got into my nose. My hand hurt, my shoulder complained, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I can barely do it. Then came carrying boxes of herbs, arranging jars, washing utensils, attending to people. And then the part happened that I didn't expect. The people who walked in didn't treat me like a Pierce. They didn't even know who I was. An old man asked for a tea to sleep better. A mother came looking for something to stop her son's cough. An older woman just wanted to talk and be heard for 5 minutes. Loretta asked simple questions, no fluff, and listened in a way I had never seen in my circle. I stood by the side, grabbing jars, writing down names, and caught myself paying attention as if I were learning a new language. It wasn't about herbs, it was about people. When I got back to the apartment that night, I took off my sneakers and saw a silly thing. Dust on the toe. Real dust from the street, from work. I stared at that for longer than I should have, and it was like that dust was proof that I had existed for a few hours. I sat on the sofa and didn't open any social media. I didn't answer anyone. I just stayed quiet, with a strange sensation that I was starting from zero, and that this was going to really piss off my father when he found out. And I knew he was going to find out. I thought I could hide it. Seriously. I thought I could keep that routine like a ridiculous secret. A me thing, distant from my father's empire. But in a house where everyone lives by a schedule, with cameras, drivers, and people coming and going, nothing stays hidden for long. On the third day, I arrived at the building with the smell of herbs stuck to my clothes and a small stain on my shirt cuff. I hadn't even noticed, but my father noticed. Richard Pierce always notices. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the marble counter as if he were in his own office, tablet open and an expensive mug in hand. It wasn't a good morning. It was a disguised interrogation. "Where were you yesterday afternoon?" he asked without raising his voice. His calm was worse than a scream. I hesitated for half a second, and that was enough. He narrowed his eyes. "Ethan." My name in his mouth sounded like an order. I took a deep breath and decided that if I lied, I would go back to being a character. "I went to work," I said. The word work tore a hole in the air. He let out a short laugh, the kind of laugh from someone who thinks they're hearing a bad joke. "Work where?" I felt my jaw harden, and it was almost funny to realize it. I was doing exactly the micro-action I never did before. I was holding my ground. "At a herb shop, on the south side, with a lady named Loretta." I spoke simply, no fluff, and saw the transformation on his face as if someone had pushed a button. The expression turned to disgust, shame, and anger, all in sequence. "You are out of your mind." He put down the tablet, and the mug made a dry sound on the marble. "You are a Pierce. You don't clean floors for anyone. You don't mix with that kind of place." The phrase, "that kind of place," came out like he was talking about trash. And I, who always accepted these phrases as normal, felt something different. It wasn't sadness. It was a hard, almost cold clarity. I gripped the chair to keep my voice from shaking and said, "I'm doing it because I need to." He walked around the counter and came closer, and I saw he was trying to regain control, the same way he does in a meeting when someone threatens the plan. "I pay for the best doctor. I buy the treatment. I'll move you to another country if necessary," he said. Buy as if it were a synonym for save. I raised my face and stared at him in a way I never had. "Dad, you aren't saving me. You're trying to silence the problem." He stood motionless, as if I had cursed at him. And I continued, because this time I didn't want to back down. "I'm better off there, cleaning floors and carrying boxes, than here pretending everything is fine." The explosion came when I said it was unpaid. The word, unpaid, offended him more than anything. "So besides being sick, you want to be humiliated?" He pointed at me like I was a bad headline about to hit the press. "Do you have any idea what they'll say? What this does to me? To the company? The company. Always the company." I clenched my jaw until it hurt, and answered all at once, not giving him time to crush me with a speech. Better you see me alive at a herb counter than dead in a luxury coffin. When I said coffin, his face changed for an instant. It wasn't anger, it was fear. But he swallowed it quickly, as he always does with any feeling that doesn't match his image. I grabbed my key from the counter and went to my room, but not to hide. To leave, I threw 2 changes of clothes into a backpack and heard my father speaking behind me, voice loud now, calling it madness, shame, ingratitude. I didn't answer. I just zipped it shut with force and walked past him in the hallway. When I opened the apartment door, he shouted my name again, as if to pull back the obedient son. I stopped at the threshold for half a second and said, "I'll come back when I have a face of my own." And I went down. In the elevator, my finger pressed the ground floor button until it turned white, and I knew. I knew that exit was going to lead me straight to a truth my father has been trying to hide for decades. I thought that by leaving the apartment, I would feel freedom. What I felt was silence. A heavy silence, like someone who just broke the oldest rule of their own house. Caleb picked me up a few blocks away because I didn't want to go down to the lobby and become a spectacle. He didn't say anything on the way, just opened the back door and let me in. I sat there staring at my hands in my lap, trying to understand how I managed to say those words to my father without running back to apologize. The city passed by outside, and I realized something. I was scared, but it was a fear that pushed me forward, not one that paralyzed me. At the shop, Loretta received me as if I were only 5 minutes late. "No, I told you so. No drama." She just pointed to the sink and said, "Wash this." I washed it. And for a while, I managed to forget my last name. It was later, when she started preparing lunch, that she called me with that tone of someone about to pull an old thread. "Your father called me." I froze inside, but on the outside, I just leaned the box carefully against the counter. "What?" She nodded, stirring a pot as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "He's coming. And I want you here when he arrives." I didn't understand at first. "You know my father?" I let that out almost laughing, because it seemed impossible. Loretta didn't even look at me. "I do." The word came out firm. "And it's time for him to stop pretending." She put the spoon aside and stared at me. "Today you two are going to eat with me, at the same table. No masks." I stood with my mouth half open, trying to imagine Richard Pierce walking into that simple place, sitting on a creaky chair, eating homemade food served on a common plate. It was like imagining a king on a bus. And the worst part, I knew he was going to hate every second. When he arrived, he didn't come with a line of security guards, nor with that entourage of important people. He came alone. That already scared me. The doorbell rang, and I saw my father standing in the entrance, looking around as if he were entering a dangerous environment just because it was poor. His suit looked like a costume in there. He saw me and tried to maintain his posture, but I saw his eyes narrow, calculating the damage. Loretta came out from the back with a dish towel in her hand, and I swear, my father, the man who never stutters, got tongue-tied for a second. It was fast, but it was real. "Loretta," he said, as if the name were an object he hadn't touched in years. She didn't smile. She just pointed to the table. "Sit, Richard." My father blinked, as if no one in the world spoke to him like that. "I didn't come here to be," he was going to say, humiliated. I saw it in the way he drew breath. But Loretta cut him off. "You came because your son is wasting away, and you no longer know how to buy a solution. So sit." I stood still by the counter, and my finger gripped the wooden edge until it turned white. It wasn't fear of her. It was fear of what was coming. At the table, the food smelled of garlic, spices, and simple things done well. The same table where Loretta served people from the neighborhood. My father looked at the plate, as if it were a test. And then Loretta spoke, bluntly, like someone ripping off a bandage. "Did you think I didn't recognize the last name? Did you think I didn't recognize your way? You were my apprentice." My father went motionless. His fork stopped in the air. I looked from one to the other, trying to understand if this was some cruel joke. "What?" came out of me in a thread of a voice. Loretta leaned her elbows on the table and spoke quietly, but every word seemed to hit the wall. "He was a skinny kid, full of hunger and pride. He learned here. He learned to work, to treat people like people. And then he decided he was ashamed of who he was. My father clenched his fist under the table. I saw it by the movement of his arm. She continued, "You moved up in life and bought your own silence. You buried the past as if it were trash. And that poison leaked into your house." My father tried to speak, but only air came out. And I, for the first time, saw the man who always seemed invincible as someone cornered by an old truth. That was when I understood why I was fading. It wasn't just me. It was a whole family lie swallowing me slowly. And there, with the spoon tapping lightly on the plate and the sound of traffic outside, I realized that the confrontation with my father hadn't ended in the apartment. That had been just the beginning, because now he wasn't arguing with me. He was facing the only person who knew his version before the money. And you can believe this. When a man like Richard Pierce realizes someone can tell who he used to be, he does anything to control the narrative. My father tried to pull himself together quickly, the way he always does. He straightened his body in the chair, as if posture solved shame. "This was another life," he said, with a polished voice, trying to put distance between it all. "It has no relevance." Loretta let out a short laugh, humorless. "No relevance?" She repeated, and the word turned into a knife. "Your son is disappearing, and you are still trying to pretend that the past leaves no trace." I looked at the plate in front of me, but I couldn't eat. The food was there, warm, real, and the conversation had turned into a kind of heat that burned. Richard stared at me as if I were her accomplice. "You brought this into our house," he said, low, but with venom. I felt my jaw harden again. Automatically? "I didn't bring it. I just stopped pretending." I spoke without shouting, and that seemed to irritate him more, because my father is used to winning by volume and authority. But there, at that simple table, he had no stage. He had two people looking at him without fear. Loretta pointed her finger at him, not like a theatrical accusation, but like someone tallying a bill. "Do you know why I recognized him right away?" she said, looking at me. "Because he has the same emptiness in his eyes that you had." My father tried to interrupt, but she didn't give him space. "You were brilliant, Richard, hardworking, and you were also cruel when you felt small. You promised you'd never forget where you came from. And the day you got an expensive suit, you started spitting on the floor that taught you to stand." My father gripped the napkin in his hand until it crumpled. I saw it. Pure micro-action. He was holding back anger and humiliation at the same time. I took a deep breath and said what I had been holding back since the clinic, since the mirror, since the first broom in my hand. "Dad, I'm not sick because my body failed." I swallowed hard, and my voice came out firmer than I expected. "I'm like this because I spent my whole life living the way you taught, pretending, stepping on others, laughing at people I didn't even know. And inside, I felt empty. I didn't use a pretty word. I didn't want to. I wanted him to understand like a common person understands." My father looked at me as if I had betrayed the family. "I gave you everything," he blurted out, and then came the ready speech, the one he uses to justify anything. "I protected you. I built this so you'd never go through what I went through." Loretta slapped her palm on the table, lightly, just enough to interrupt. "And along the way you became the man who hurt you," she said, "and taught your son to become him too." My father opened his mouth, closed it, blinked fast. His image, the uncheckable CEO, was cracking there, and I think that's what hurt him the most. I stared at my father and made a choice I had never made. I didn't beg. I didn't ask for permission. I put the condition on the table, the way Loretta put work for me. "I can forgive you," I said slowly, "but I won't go back to that house to pretend you're perfect. If you want to start over, start by apologizing to those you destroyed." My father let out a soundless laugh, a laugh of disbelief. "Are you telling me how to live?" he asked. I held his gaze. "I'm telling you how to stop poisoning everyone." He stayed quiet for too long. The noise of the street came through the window. A bus passing, someone laughing outside, the doorbell moving with the wind. Life continued as normal, and inside there, it seemed hours was suspended. My father drew breath, and for the first time I remember, he seemed smaller. Not weak, human. He looked at Loretta. and I saw something I never saw in that face. Fear of really being seen. His hand trembled just a little when he picked up the glass of water, and he disguised it quickly, as if he were signing a contract. "Okay," he said, almost whispering. Just one word. And in that instant, I knew the hardest part wasn't confronting him inside that shop. It was making him face the world outside and admit, in public, that he had hurt people. And I swear to you, I had no idea how he was going to react when placed in front of the names and faces he tried to erase. The next day, my father sent me a short message. "Come with me." No, please, no explanation. I met him in the lobby of the company building, and seeing Richard Pierce there, without the meeting smile and without the full armor, was strange. He adjusted the watch on his wrist, as if that gesture were a life buoy. "We're going to resolve this quickly," he said. I stared at him. "It's not quick. It's real." He swallowed hard and didn't answer. He just turned and started walking, and I followed, because I needed to see if he really had the courage. The first stop was a small restaurant, where he always had lunch when he was still nobody, according to Loretta. The owner was behind the counter. A man with gray hair, hands marked by work, and a look that hardened when he saw my father. Richard froze for a second in the entrance. I saw it because I was next to him. He clenched his jaw and walked to the counter as if entering a courtroom. "Frank," he started, but the man interrupted. "Don't call me that." The guy's voice came out without a scream, just with tiredness. And that knocked my father down more than any insult. My father lowered his face for an instant and let out the words as if they weighed a ton. "I was unfair to you. I used you when I needed to, and I erased you when I climbed up." The silence that followed was worse than noise. The restaurant continued operating around us, people passing, cutlery clinking, and there in the middle, it seemed the air had changed density. Frank let out a bitter laugh. "You destroyed my business," he said, and never looked back. I felt my throat close, but I stayed quiet. I wanted my father to listen without escaping. Richard didn't try to justify himself. He opened his wallet, and I thought, here it comes. But he didn't pull out money. He pulled out a card, wrote a number on the back, and put it on the counter. "I didn't come to buy forgiveness," he said, voice lower. "I came to own up to the damage and fix what can be fixed, the way you say." No announcement, no press. Frank looked at the card as if it were a trap. And why now? My father took a second to answer. "Because I almost lost my son?" And I realized I had already lost myself a long time ago. When we left, my father let out his breath as if he had been holding it for miles. He didn't look relieved. He looked exposed. I looked at him and said, "That's just the first one." He nodded, tense. "I know." And then he added, staring at the street as if he were going into war without a suit. "And there are people who one day accept it." It was the first time I heard my father admit he doesn't control the outcome. And in that moment, I understood that the public apology I demanded was going to become news anyway. Because when a CEO falls from the pedestal by his own will, there's always someone ready to push. When my father announced the headquarters was moving from the top of the financial hill down to the old downtown, I thought it was just a speech to calm me down. Richard Pierce always protected that building as if it were a throne. But he repeated the sentence in front of the board, without a smile. "We are going back near real people." I saw the executives look at each other, and one of them even let out a short laugh, like someone waiting for the punchline. My father didn't return the humor. He just stood motionless, fingers aligned on the table, hard, and the laughter died alone. The reaction came like a wave. Investors don't like symbols when they mess with money. There were veiled threats, people talking about prestige, security, image. My father heard everything, and I saw his jaw lock the way he does when he wants to scream, but chooses to master the tone. "I'm not doing this to look good," he said. "I'm doing it because I'm tired of looking." A director tried to bend him with numbers. My father answered without raising his voice. "If you want to leave, leave. I won't sustain this on top of shame anymore." On the day we went to see the new building, I understood the impact. Dark brick, simple entrance, buses passing, people walking, noise of small commerce. No valet, no red carpet. My father stopped on the sidewalk, adjusted the watch on his wrist, as if that gesture held him in place. A lady recognized him and whispered to another. My father heard and didn't look away. He just breathed short and went in. And I thought, this is where he's going to find out if his courage was real or just guilt. The following weeks were a war without screaming. The elite mocked. Blogs called it theater. Some partners threatened to break off. And yet, my father started doing what I told him, apologizing without a stage. People he ignored for years heard his name at the door, saw the man there, without an entourage. Some frowned, others exploded. One slammed the door in his face. My father swallowed it all, went back to the car, and stayed silent, looking at the street as if he were accepting a beating. I didn't applaud. I just stayed by his side, because that was the price. A few months later, I looked in the mirror and didn't see a character draining down the drain anymore. I was stronger, firmer, and the work at Mrs. Loretta Hayes' shop became part of me, not punishment. The company remained standing, and to many people's surprise, started to prosper with cleaner rules, without crushing people to prove power. One afternoon, Loretta called me to the back of the shop and put an old notebook in my hand. "Now, it's your turn to teach," she said. I held the notebook as if it were heavy on purpose, and I answered in the simplest way I could. "Okay, but I won't teach with speeches. I'll teach with practice." The day when I passed by the new company headquarters in the old downtown, among common people, without that castle pose, I remember what Mrs. Loretta Hayes told me. Descending is easy. Hard is remaining human when everything starts to go right. My father still carries the weight of what he did. Only now he doesn't pretend it doesn't exist. He apologized to people I didn't even know he had destroyed. Some accepted, others didn't. And he learned to swallow that without trying to buy the ending. I changed too, not just because I regained strength, but because I stopped using my last name as a shield. I continued going to the shop 3 times a week, even when I could already go back to normal, because that normal was what was killing me inside. And on the day Loretta handed me her notebook and said, "Now it's your turn to teach," I understood that the cure doesn't end when you get better. It starts when you stop hiding. In the end, karma didn't come as revenge. It came as truth. And the truth, you cannot bribe. If this story hooked you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me, I would do it all again. And you? Would you have forgiven?